Hi there, I'm Jane Taylor from Inflationbusting.com. Might be wondering why I'm wearing a hat today. Just given my hair a rest from the straighteners and I couldn't be bothered to do it, so it popped back in a bubble. But I'm here today to talk to you about something that, although the title, the Freddo Index, is a bit tongue-in-cheek, it's actually quite a serious issue that I'm going to be dealing with. The folks at Vouchercloud have done quite a bit of research on our behalves to find out what's changed since 2000, comparing the prices of some of our old school favourites and what they used to cost back then with what they cost today, and comparing that with what's happened with inflation. So, are things bad? Are we in rip-off Britain? If things had moved in line with the inflation's increased 52% since the year 2000, but have our favourites increased by the same amount or more? Are we paying through the nose for things these days? Has everything gone up by the same amount? Well, the Freddo Index has looked at the state of the British economy since 2000 and found that the humble Freddo, which I remember costing 5p and for years seemed to cost 10p, has gone up to an inflation-busting 25 pence now. That's 150% increase since 2000 compared to 52% inflationary increase. But staggeringly, it doesn't stop there. Our Beano comic, the humble Beano comic, we remember reading those stories when we were kids. Our kids are paying through the nose. Since 2000, the price of a Beano has gone up by an inflation-busting 380%. Cinema tickets, 116%. Mars bar, 106%. But if that weren't enough, there's another issue we need to deal with as well. And particularly in the case of things like chocolate. We aren't just paying inflation-busting amounts for our chocolate now compared to 2000. We're not getting as much either. We aren't getting bigger. Our bars are getting smaller. So we're going to look at this in a little bit more detail. But at the end of this video, I will put a link in where you can kind of click through to see the details in full. And there's some really good graphs and illustrations to just show you how much we're paying for those old school favourites nowadays. So if we move on and we do look at the price of a Freddo, what we originally called this index, the Freddo Index, what's happened to the cost of a Freddo over time? Well, within the last 7 years, the price has jumped from 10p to 25 pence, as I've said. That's more than 2p per year. The price today, based on inflation, should only be 15 pence, however. But as I said, the other issue is its size. The Freddo, originally when it came out, admittedly was 17 grams, which then increased to 20 grams. But in recent years, it's dropped back down to 18 grams. Not much, you might think, but it certainly helps with the Cadbury's profits if that happens to every bar across the amount of bars that are in circulation in this country. So it's a bit of a double whammy for us. But spare a thought for our Australian friends on the other side of the world. Their Freddo has gone down to a measly 12 grams over time. So they really are being ripped off with their Freddo prices. If we move on then to the Mars bar, I'd mentioned about the Mars bar going up by more than the price of inflation. They've jumped 11p over the last 5 years. The biggest price jump's been in 2010 and 2011, where they went up 6p each year. But as the price has gone up, the size has gone down. In 2002, we had a 2.5 gram reduction, and then in 2008, we had a 3.5 gram decrease in weight, and then in 2013, we had a 7 gram decrease in weight. So we've actually lost about 13 grams on the way to the Mars bar, whilst having to pay a huge inflation busting amount over time. Okay, so moving on to the Beano, that's another one where I think it's a bit of a shock what's happened to the prices. The magazine in 2000 cost 52 pence. If you compare that to the price now, the price we have now for the comic is £2.50 this year. The biggest price rise was seen in 2012 when the cost of a Beano jumped by 50p to £2. So if you bear that in mind, if it continues to increase at the rate it has been doing, you'll be paying £4.16 for the Beano in 2030, which would be enough for 8 comic grades back in 2000. So that's a pretty depressing statistic. So I know that also you can see how cinema tickets have been affected. Now, for this comparison, they've used an average cinema ticket price. It doesn't take into account what you pay if you went to a cinema in London or some of the peak times. And admittedly, you can get some deals by doing Meerkat movies or Orange Wednesdays or whatever it might be. But actually, for a family to go to the cinema these days, you don't get much change from £30. And if you then invest and pay for their popcorn and their drinks, it's an even bigger dent in your wallet. I have to say, I smuggle them in. One time I turned up at the cinema and my friend thought I was pregnant, but it was actually me with a couple of packets of Morrison's popcorn stuffed down the front of my coat. I actually rustled when I walked, but that's just me being a bit frugal. Anyway, the facts bit of the cost of a cinema ticket. You're likely to be paying over twice as much for a cinema ticket as you were 15 years ago. On average, £8.54 compared to £4.40. And the biggest price rise was seen in 2005 when it rose by £2 up to £6.39. So also you've got to bear in mind, if you want to go and see a 3D show and you haven't got your own glasses, there's additional costs on top of that, and a premium price added for the privilege of seeing a 3D movie. So there you go. There's a little kind of analysis of how much we're paying now compared to 2000 for some of our old favourites. It's not in line with inflation. Some of them have increased by a staggering amount, with the Beano being the worst culprit, 380%. I'd encourage you to have a look at the Freddo Index on Vouchercloud website and click on the link in my post. Thanks very much for your time. Bye.